What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I'm going to try to keep this video pretty short, that way just in case you're halfway through lowering your truck and you don't know what to do, you can quickly watch this video. Or for those of you who don't want to watch a 25-minute long video with showing very detailed instructions. So with that being said, let's get started. First things first, you want to chalk your front wheels. Next up, you're going to want to jack up your truck from the center of the rear axle, so right where the pumpkin is. And you're going to want to jack it up as high as you possibly can. That way when you put jack stands on the front of the leaf spring hangers, the axle can droop all the way down without the rear wheels touching the ground. Or if you want to remove your wheels to get that little bit of extra clearance in case you can't lift your truck up that high, that also helps. But you do want to make sure that there is nothing touching the axle or holding it up, whether that's your wheels or whether it's the jack holding the axle up. You want it to droop out as far as it can. Rear suspension is now at full droop. It looks like the jack's on there, but it's just hovering over just in case something happens to fail and it falls. I have the jack there. But it's at full droop right now. And the reason you want to do this is because once you remove these bolts, the U-bolts, the way I like to do it is with the jack, I jack up the jack. The truck is going to stay here, and when you remove the U-bolts and you jack up the diff, then it gives you a space in here where you could just simply slide in your drop block and then put the new U-bolts in there and tighten it all up, and that's super simple and easy. Whereas if you're holding the diff up, the springs have tension and they're wanting to push down as you're trying to kind of maneuver in there. Just because this truck has drop locks already doesn't mean that it changes. Everything's exactly the same except you actually remove the block since there is a block. Now if your truck is factory, this part right here will be touching the leaves itself. So all you have to do is jack it up enough to fit your size block in there. For example, these are 3-inch drop block, and I'm going to be installing 4-inch drop blocks. Now you're going to want to undo the nuts on the U-bolts down here. Sometimes they're 3/4, sometimes they're 17s. They vary. Since these are aftermarket U-bolts, these are 3/4. Now I believe the factory ones are 17, but don't quote me on that. And if you don't want to struggle as much, I would recommend removing the shock. That way it's not trying to push this bottom plate down and it makes it hard to kind of get in there. So I'm going to be running the Beltec 4-inch tapered blocks. So they have a 2-degree taper. They're not just flat. And this helps with your pinion angle. And if you have them tapered, your center carry bearing lasts a little bit longer since it's not really binding it up and pushing it in. This right here is the part number, if anyone is interested. And I would highly recommend that you test fit everything to make sure everything is the same size as what you're running or as what your truck needs before you tear anything apart. For example, there is different size radius U-bolts, so you want to make sure that this hugs your axle tightly. Also, big tip, do not try to use your old hardware. Use the new hardware it comes with, and never reuse U-bolts. So once you tighten them down and get them all snug and you ever have to remove them, just get new U-bolts. Be mindful that if your driveway is inclined like mine and you remove the U-bolts, the diff is going to want to walk forward slightly, but if you have a ratchet strap holding it back or someone holding it, then it shouldn't be that big of a deal. Not to mention when you put your new U-bolts in there and clamp it all down to this, you can get like 1 or 2 threads on the nuts and slowly tighten it, and it'll pull it back to where it should be, since there is a little pin on here, a little dowel pin. So it's kind of hard to mess this up since this one has a male end, this one has a female end, and since I did get the tapered ones, the high point, the larger point, goes on the rear. You can see now that the leaves are at full droop and the shock isn't mounted anymore, binding anything up, I jacked up the rear axle housing a little bit, which gave me this space. So now I just pull this one out, and you can see whoever added these did it proper because they added a 2-degree shim. Now this is a 2-piece system, which is not the best because this can wiggle around and kind of chafe itself, and eventually it'll wear out since they are aluminum. Luckily the Beltec ones, it's all built in, so you don't have to worry about that. But if you're extremely low, and I know there is people who stack blocks, which I would never recommend you stack blocks, but if you were to stack blocks, you could always get one of these if you ever do more than 4-inch blocks, which, like I said, I would never recommend going over 4-inch blocks. If you want to go lower, I would do other modifications like leaf springs and stuff like that, but never stack or do more than 4-inch blocks. But let's just say you did. You can pick these up for about like 25 bucks. 2-degree shim, and you throw that on there just to help with the pinion angle and your carrier bearing on your drive shaft. Now you grab your new block, or your block if you didn't already have one. Make sure that the bottom is aligned, and there you go. And then you also want to align the axle with the block right there. Now you don't want to fully tighten down that side until you get this side all put together. Once you have both sides pretty snug, then at that point you can tighten it all evenly. So a little bit over there, a little bit over here. Try not to do one nut at a time. Try to do all 4, like if you were to tighten down a wheel, crisscross. And then be sure to cut off the excess of the U-bolts, because if you leave them, you will get caught on literally everything. So I'm just about done with the install. Everything is nice and tight. I just need to cut these off, but I'm also going to be making a video on how to cut the bump stops for those of you who are running 15x10s, which this truck is getting 15x10s, which I will be posting in a later date. But I will be having to cut the bump stops a certain way so that the tires don't eat up the bedside or the fenders, and yet it still is nice and low and can, you know, deal with heavy loads and all that stuff. So that's kind of what I've done on all my past 720s, and it's always worked out pretty decent. So I'm going to do the same thing to this one, but I don't want to make this video too long, so I'm going to make a different video, which I'll probably have a link down in the description on this video in case anyone is interested in checking that out. Now I just got to put the wheels on, and we should be good. I also will be posting a video on lowering the front, which I'm going to do right now, but like I said, don't want to make this video too long.